Greetings, brothers and sisters. Welcome to another awareness session of Reconstructing Minds Incorporated in partnership with Positive Lifestyle Management and Project Righteous Endeavors. My name is Shantario, aka Brother Midnight. Will be part 3 of the series that I've been talking about the Jim Crow laws and how they affect voting rights. And it's been a very interesting series so far. To start this particular session out, I want you, for those who have it, to read their September 27th, 1982 letter in reference to what I'm going to be talking about in dealing with voter rights and how the Jim Crow laws even affected the right to vote for black people during that time. So without any further ado, we're going to open up this session. Now, last week, we were dealing with how Jim Crow laws came into existence and how the name that Jim Crow even came from, which was called Jim Crow, which was created through a minstrel show by a man who was named Thomas Dartmouth Rice, and how the Separate Care Act came into effect in 1890, which claimed the notion separate but equal. So, it's very interesting on how the Jim Crow laws still affect us right to this day, even the Willie Lynch laws, but we're not going to dig into that. The Willie Lynch syndrome on how to create slaves came into existence as well. We're going to get right into it, going back into the Jim Crow laws. In 1890, Louisiana passed a law that required blacks to ride in separate railroad cars. On June 7th, 1892, Homer Plessy, a carpenter in Louisiana who was 7th/8th Caucasian, boarded a train and sat in a car reserved for whites. He refused to move and was arrested. The local judge ruled against Plessy, and in 1896, the Supreme Court upheld the lower court's ruling. It had held that separate but equal accommodations did not violate Plessy's rights, which in essence it did, according to the 14th Amendment. Now, it says, with the Supreme Court's approval, the Plessy decision paved the way for racial segregation, in which it really did, and how it affected. So we're going to go into a breakdown and the Plessy versus Ferguson, which is the name of the judge who ruled over Plessy's case at that particular moment within the Supreme Court. And you can find this particular documentation in 163 U.S. 537, 616 S7 CT 1138, and 41 LED 256, Plessy versus Ferguson, docket number 210, May 18th, 1896, where it reads that the petitioner was a citizen of the United States and a resident of the state of Louisiana of mixed descent in the proportion of 7/8 Caucasian and 1/8 African blood, that the mixture of colored blood was not discernible in him, and that he was entitled to every recognition, right, privilege, and immunity secured to the citizens of the United States of the white race by its Constitution and laws. That on June 7th, 1892, he engaged and paid for a first-class passage on the East Louisiana Railway from the New Orleans to Covington in the same state, and thereupon entered a passenger train and took possession of a vacant seat in a coach where passengers of the white race were accommodated. So they had a real big issue with this. It was a real big issue. This Plessy versus Ferguson case was a big case, one of the first big cases for a black male at the highest level of court, which is the Supreme Court. Now, as I continue to read, it says that such railroad company was incorporated by the laws of Louisiana as a common carrier and was not authorized to distinguish between citizens according to their race, but withstanding this, petitioner was required by the conductor under penalty of objection from said train and imprisonment to vacate said coach and occupy another seat in a coach assigned by said company of persons not of the white race. Further, no other reason that the petitioner was of the colored race, that upon petitioner's refusal to comply to such order, he was, with the aid of the police, forcibly ejected from said coach and hurried off to an imprisoned in the parish jail of New Orleans, and there held to answer a charge made by such officer to the effect that he was guilty of having criminally violated an act of General Assembly of the state approved July 10th, 1890, in such case made and provided, which is talking about the Separate Care Act of 1890, better known as Separate but Equal. So we see that this case with Homer, with Plessy, was a very intriguing case, which ultimately led in a racial charge against black people, all not only for himself but all through the South. You know, even today in 2022, we are still seeing the effects of the Jim Crow laws all around the United States, especially within the confines of the Bible Belt in deep South states, Louisiana, Alabama, Kentucky, Tennessee, South Carolina, North Carolina, Georgia, Virginia, West Virginia, states that were a part of the 13 colonies. All these different states are still operating within the confines of the Jim Crow laws right to this day. But I'm going to continue reading. It says, Southern states passed laws that rejected African Americans' access to schools, restaurants, hospitals, and public places. Signs that said whites only or colored were posted at entrances and exits, water fountains, waiting rooms, and restrooms. By 1914, every Southern state had passed laws that created two separate societies, one black, one white. By World War I, even places of employment were segregated. And that's very true, because, you know, I can even remember in my own life where I was a young boy growing up in California. And in '85, my family had moved to a small town called Spring Hill, Louisiana. And it was a train track that separated the town. And even though the kids had went to school together, it was like the blacks were on the west side and the white people were on the east side. So I could like bear witness to this, because growing up on the West Coast, I never really experienced, you know what I'm saying, race issues or anything like that, because you know, growing up in California, it's a very diverse place, and it a lot of different cultures and races and different peoples from all over the world live there. So, you know, me making this jump to Louisiana was like a whole nother world for me. And you could hear even within a small town like Spring Hill, Louisiana, that racial slurs was passed around. And it was crazy to me because I never experienced that. But just like Homer Plessy, you know, you know, experiencing racial segregation was a major thing growing up, not only back then for him in the 1800s, but even now today we're dealing with in society to where they're trying to reverse time. Not too long ago, and I believe it was in 2020 where I heard the governor of Alabama said that it was better, that this country was better when slavery was around. So we see the effects of racial segregation even within the 21st century. I'm going to read something else from this particular Supreme Court docket in reference to what Homer Plessy faced. This is number 6. It says the petition for the writ of prohibition averred the petitioner was 1/8 Caucasian and 1/8 African blood, that the mixture of the color of blood was not discernible in him. And in other words, discernible meaning it couldn't be discovered. And that he was entitled to every right, privilege, and immunity secured to the citizens of the United States of the white race, and that upon such theory he took possession of a vacant seat in a coach where passengers of the white race were accommodated, and was ordered by the conductor to vacate said coach and take a seat in another assigned to the persons of colored race, and that refused to comply with such demand, he was forcibly ejected, that the aid of the police officer imprisoned in the parish jail to answer to a charge of having violated the above act, which really didn't make no sense because the 14th Amendment was enacted in 1868 and it was ratified to protect the rights of all citizens of the United States of America, whether they were born here or naturalized here. So, it's always something, in dealing with, racial segregation and how it affects us even right today in 2022, especially back then, to where, this case had made national attention, and ultimately, with time passing, those who knew the law had stepped up in his stead to fight against such racial discrimination that existed back then. And you have a lot of those who are still fighting for us right to this day. Some of our civil rights leaders and activists have passed on, but you have a lot of them that's still out here and they're still fighting right to this day. Number 13, the objective of the amendment was undoubtedly to enforce the absolute equality of the two races before the law, but in the nature of things, it cannot have been intended to abolish distinction based on color or enforce social as distinguished D from political equality or a commingling of the two races upon terms unsatisfactory to either, laws permitting and even requiring the separation in places when they are liable to be brought into contact do not necessarily imply the inferiority of either race to the other, and having been generally, if not universally, recognized as within the competency of the state legislators in the exercise of their police power. The most common instance of this is connected with the establishment of separate schools for white and colored children who have been held to be a valid exercise of the legislative powers, even by the courts of state, whether the political rights of the colored people have been longest and more earnestly enforced. So we see how this dynamic plays a role even today in 2022, because, now, you still have certain parts of the South that, feel that that black people are inferior to the white race. You have certain organizations that feel that the black race is inferior to the white race. But, we must continue to fight the good fight and know the political processes and know the law. You know what I mean? And, that's one of the most important things. We must increase our literacy. You know what I'm saying? Illiteracy is our number one enemy. So education is our number one ally. Knowledge, as it says in the blueprint, is the opposite of illiteracy. So we must attain the knowledge to continue in this fight, especially when it comes to our voter rights and what needs to be said and done in order to understand the political processes of our country and become political aware and have the skills and necessities to deal with these challenges that we face in the realities of Black America. It says other Jim Crow laws did not specifically mention race, but were written and applied in ways that discriminated against blacks. Literacy tests and poll taxes administered with informal loopholes and trick questions barred nearly all blacks from voting. Though more than 130 blacks were registered to vote in Louisiana in 1896, only 1,342 were on the rolls in 1904. So we see how the Jim Crow laws affected even voter rights, being that, in Chicago, the 21st century vote was initiated, a legitimate stand for the ghetto youth all over Chicago to have a voice within their community, which was initiated by Mr. Larry Hoover and Wallace Gator Bradley and others who had a key role in initiating the 21st century vote. We have to pay attention to what's going on around. We have ghetto prisoners fighting for their lives. And Mr. Larry Hoover has spent the last 48 years fighting for his life, 22 in the Illinois State Department of Corrections and 26 within the confines of ADX Florence, Colorado. So we must continue to fight the good fight, no matter what it is, and become aware of what's going on. As it is quoted and as has been said before, to be aware is to be alive. And this is also critical to our awareness, preparedness. Who is the enemy? What is the enemy? So we must understand the political processes and how they play a major role in our voting rights. As we've seen in today's society that our voter rights are being attacked. We have 19 states who have joined in the fight to suppress voter rights for Black people that could ultimately affect how we vote. And not only that, the candidates that are put into place, which can ultimately be a win-win for the right wing of the White House, and specifically the Grand Old Party, the Republican Party, who is vain in their efforts to support a man who has been diabolical in changing the results of the last election to solidify his seat as the president, which is the former president Donald Trump. So, no matter what it is, we must continue to fight, brothers and sisters. To be aware is to be alive, no matter what the situation is or what we're going through. And I want to leave you with something. This is coming from the preface, Second Resurrection. It says the word. When the word has been given, I'll move out. A common phrase amongst our folks, and each time in the history of our long struggle meaning movement for justice and freedom. We have wondered what it meant. What did it mean when Frederick Douglass says, without struggle, there is no progress? When Marcus Garvey said, we are determined to solve our own problem. When Philip Randolph said, the salvation of the people must come from within. When Dr. Martin Luther King said, once an oppressed people rise up, there is no stopping short of full freedom. When Fannie Lou Hamer said, we are sick and tired of being sick and tired. And when your governing body has said, we are an organization with everybody having a responsibility, and we make up the organization as individuals who have come together as a collective. What did the word mean? The word was a mere flashpoint in the cadence of time to many, symbolizing the will of the people to mobilize and struggle to ensure their survival and continued progress in this land. We must continue to do what is right. We must continue to fight, no matter what the situation may be, no matter how hard it may become. Our voter rights are very important to our future and our survival. And this is going to be key in understanding the political processes of the United States of America. I would like to take this time out to recognize our dear sisters who have continued to fight and have died in their fight. Dorothy Height. She was a part of the National Council of Negro Women and also mentored by Mary McLeod Bethune, who was the founder of the National Council of Negro Women. Septima Poinsett Clark. She joined the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. Ella Baker. She was the co-founder of the Young Negroes Cooperative League. Coretta Scott King, wife of Dr. Martin Luther King and one of the key components in the Montgomery bus boycott. Fannie Lou Hamer. She was a part of the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party. And Claudette Coven, first Black woman to not give her seat on the bus in Montgomery, Alabama. So with that being said, this has been another awareness session of Reconstructed Minds Incorporated. My name is Shantario, aka Brother Midnight. I hope we have learned something together. Let's continue to fight for our voter rights. Plenty much love.